Donald Trump, after a conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, still seems to have hopes that he will be able to negotiate with the Russian dictator to end Russia's war against Ukraine. But what's interesting is that in Donald Trump's team, there is complete confusion because different sides of his team are saying completely different things. What do I mean? The thing is, literally a few hours before Donald Trump's conversation with Putin, United States Vice President Jeydi Vens stated that Putin does not want any peace. All negotiations have reached a dead end. It just remained to determine if Putin was open to anything in this conversation and if continuing dialogue with him was worthwhile at all. Additionally, Jeydi Vens said that it is likely time to abandon these negotiations and pursue alternative approaches. I want to emphasize once again this statement by Jeydi Vens, who is still Donald Trump's closest ally, which was made before the phone conversation between the two presidents. And for some reason, little attention was paid to this statement. I want to emphasize it and quote what Jeydi Vens said. Regarding the United States of America recognizing the fact that Putin does not want peace, and accordingly, that it is time to present Putin with a rather tough ultimatum. I'm Alexei Pechiy. It's May 19th. Let's go through this step by step. Before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and leave a comment. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link is in the video description. We publish news there more promptly. So, let's start with Donald Trump's statement after negotiations with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. I won't dwell on this for long, I'll just quote what he wrote today, and I did a full analysis of it earlier in the previous episode. Feel free to watch it if you missed it. Next, we'll discuss jurist Dr. Vance's statements. So, after the conversation with Putin, Donald Trump wrote the following in his social network, TRUTH Social. I just finished my 2-hour conversation with the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. I think it went very well. Russia and Ukraine will immediately begin negotiations on a ceasefire and, even more importantly, on ending the war. The terms for this will be agreed upon by both sides as soon as possible because they know the details of the negotiations that no one else will know. I'll pause here, and before I continue quoting Donald Trump, I'll quote a statement from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, who, after this phone conversation, already came out with certain points. And here is what Zelensky said after the phone conversation between Trump and Putin. Ukraine will not withdraw its troops from its own territory and will not submit to Russia's ultimatums. Zelensky says that we are considering the possibility of another meeting of all the teams. That is the United States, Ukraine, Russia, and the European countries. He's stating that while your bilateral negotiations are positive and intriguing, the talks will take place exclusively in this particular format. Zelensky then states that he requested Trump not to decide on matters concerning Ukraine without involving Ukraine, emphasizing that Ukraine is present. We are waiting for the proposal that Russia will present regarding how they see the path to a ceasefire. Let's go back to Donald Trump's statement following his meeting with Putin. He said the tone and spirit of their conversation were excellent. If that wasn't the case, I would say so now, or they would later. Does Russia want to conduct large-scale trade with the United States when this catastrophic bloody slaughter ends? And I agree. Russia has a colossal opportunity to create a huge number of jobs and wealth. Its potential is unlimited. Similarly, Ukraine can become a major beneficiary in the field of trade during the process of rebuilding its country. Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will begin immediately. I have informed the following about this. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and Finnish President Alexander Stubb. During a phone conversation with me, immediately after a phone conversation with President Putin, the Vatican, represented by the Pope, stated that he would be very interested in holding negotiations. Let the process begin, summarizes Donald Trump. Regarding trade, now we return to the statements of Jeydi Vens because there it's about trade, negotiations, and everything else. What Donald Trump just so bravely, so boastfully, declared. So, if we briefly analyze the latest statement by Jeydi Vens, there are such points. Negotiations have reached a dead end. It's about percentages. Trump just wants to understand how serious Putin is. Russia will not receive, says Jeydi Vens, any economic benefits if it continues to kill people. Putin has previously made some concessions, says Jeydi Vens, but the truth is, for some reason, it's not specified what those concessions are. Next, Vens talks about the fact that there are so many obstacles to a peace deal that it's actually hard to point out any single one. But the key question is, how serious is Putin? Putin is unsure how to end the war. If Russia isn't prepared, the United States will withdraw from negotiations. And I would like to point out one important thing here, that Vance actually shows a clear bias toward Russia without paying attention to criticism of Ukraine. And this statement comes after Jeydi Vance met with Volodymyr Zelensky in Italy. I don't know what Zelensky says to American representatives, but after their meetings they usually change their rhetoric a little. Because the last time Zelensky met with Trump, it was literally for 15 minutes in the Vatican. After that, Trump changed his position. He started saying that maybe Putin is really pulling the wool over my eyes and that he definitely wants to end the war and so on. So even Vance, though he grits his teeth, hints that the main obstacle to resolving this war is still Putin. Putin specifically, not Zelensky, Biden, or Ukraine as a whole, is a plus in this position. But this statement about us leaving the negotiations, well, it already sounds a bit ridiculous because I've lost count. How many times have American representatives declared that they are leaving the negotiations because this is not their war? You know, I have the feeling that Donald Trump, Mark Rubio, and Jeydi Vance interpret the issue of leaving the negotiations in completely different ways. There will be another episode today where I will analyze the chronology of changes in Donald Trump's positions. And there you'll notice that they can actually make completely different statements in a single day. Vens might say that the idea of a 30-day ceasefire is no longer relevant. On the same day, Trump stated this solution was necessary. Jeydi Vance also announced they were likely withdrawing from the negotiations. It's not working. So there's always some kind of confusion there. But let's move on. I'll still provide the full quotes from Jeydi Vance from a recent interview. When asked if the United States is still open to leaving the negotiations, Jeydi Vance confirms that they are more than open to leaving. The United States will no longer stall. Here, we want to see results. The first result that we are happy about. Russians and Ukrainians had to put their peace proposals on the table, and that happened. The second result is that they had to agree to direct negotiations with each other, and that also happened. The negotiations progressed for a while, and we realized that there was a certain deadlock here. That's why President Trump will say to Putin, look, are you serious? Are you realistic about this? Because the offer from the United States was the following. Look, there are many economic benefits to smoothing relations between Russia and the rest of the world, but you won't get all of this if you keep killing lots of innocent people. That's what Trump is talking about right now. Russia wants to resume large-scale trade with America, but as long as the war is going on, that's unrealistic. So this is like a perk, a carrot for Putin saying, we're ready to trade with you, but stop the war. Let me quote Vance further. So if you stop the killing, the United States will be a partner for the sake of peace. This was an offer to Russians, Ukrainians, and all nations in hotspots around the world. Next, Vance is asked, what do you see as an obstacle to a peace deal? Vance answers, good question. There are so many obstacles that it's hard to point to just one specifically. Look, I think one open question is how serious Putin is about peace negotiations. He has made some concessions, some serious steps, but it's unclear what exactly. But we feel that we are at a certain impasse. That's why President Trump will be talking to him on the phone. I honestly think that President Putin doesn't quite understand how to get out of this war. He has 1 million people under arms, he has restructured his entire economy, and the manufacturing facilities that used to make civilian products for people are now making ammunition for tanks, artillery, and drones. I'm not sure that Putin has a strategy for winding down this whole war. Finally, Jeydi Vance said it out loud, at least someone from the Trump administration. It's obvious. Putin can't abruptly end the war, or his entire economy will collapse. I once did such an analysis on the Pechiy News Telegram channel based on the latest official economic data of Russia. And it stays afloat precisely because of the military industry. And Russia, they themselves already admit it. How to roll this back is unclear. Next, Jeydi Vance says there is a fundamental distrust between Russia and the West. President Trump considers this frankly stupid. We must be ready to move past the mistakes made in the past. But it takes two to tango. I know that President Trump is ready to do this, but if Russia is not ready to do it, then in the end we'll say, This is not our war. This is Joe Biden's war. This is Vladimir Putin's war. We are trying to end it, but if we can't, then in the end we'll say that it was worth trying, but we won't do it anymore. Well, you know, at least Joe Dunes isn't saying anymore that this is Zelensky's war. But the very rhetoric of just saying we'll simply leave and that's it sounds a bit strange. Because Trump, in fact, to some extent even won the presidential election thanks to his statements that he would bring peace to the whole world. He claims he will end Russia's war on Ukraine within 24 hours, resolve the Gaza Strip conflict, restore all relations, and make everything wonderful. But because of this, he actually won the last presidential election. Now, Jeydi Vens says, well, it was worth a try, we tried, it didn't work out, we'll just leave here, and that's it. Next, Jeydi Vens. There were also statements about the Middle East, but we won't really get into that. The main point of Jeydi Vens is that right now, in the White House, they're trying finally, I don't know for the how many-th time, to figure out whether Putin is actually ready for peace or not. And the only thing where the positions of Jeydi Vens and Donald Trump overlap, so it's that Putin doesn't know how to end this war. He simply doesn't know how to get out of it. So Trump recently stated that Putin looks very bad. He wants to somehow get out of the war, but he simply doesn't understand how. And that's why Trump, of course, will help him with this. Jackie Vance echoes the same sentiment. The economy has been restructured for war, and with 1 million soldiers, the question remains, what's the plan for them? Then it's unclear where everyone should go next. In Europe, they understand what will happen next. In Europe, they're afraid that if the war is stopped, it won't really be stopped, just directly ended. That is, what they mean is that if some kind of peace agreement is signed, then this 1 million soldiers will have to be sent somewhere. They could likely send them against the Baltic countries, not immediately, but certainly within a few years. Therefore, finally there is some clarity in the White House. It happened. And in fact, Jeydi Vens, before the conversation between Trump and Putin, is voicing a certain ultimatum. That is, he says there is a carrot. This is the resumption of trade with Russians, not only for Americans, but for the entire Western world. And there is also a stick. These are sanctions intended to pressure Putin to find a way out of this war and make a decision. That's why I'm putting an ellipsis here. Of course, everything will depend on Donald Trump's position in this regard. And I think these negotiation games will drag on for some time. But nevertheless, you know, some enlightenment is already happening in the White House. So friends, share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you get notifications about new episodes, and don't forget to leave a like.